Very happy to have you for another webinar. We're joined by Sandra Gomes Pinto, who'll be here just in 1 second. And we're going to be discussing moving to Portugal. We're going to be looking at the latest changes with the residency visas, particularly the D7 and the digital Nomad Visa. We're also going to be looking at some of the changes to sort of EU family reunification and all of the other questions that you have asked. And Sandra is going to be a very familiar face to people who have been on Portugalist webinars before. She's helped a lot of people obtain residency in Portugal and sort out legal issues, some of them quite complicated. And we'll hopefully hear a few stories about that shortly. Sandra, it's wonderful to have you here again. I wonder, for those who haven't heard of you before, would you be able to just quickly tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you, James. I think it's really fantastic the work you are doing. So it's really nice to be here with you. I see some known people, and Risco, which is our client. So it's also I'm happy to be with our clients and to provide information for those that need it. And I'm really happy to be here with you. I think we share the same values of transparency and honesty and providing information and knowledge for those who seek and want to move to Portugal. So it's a great pleasure to me to be part also of your movement. And I'm really happy to be here. I'm a lawyer in Portugal for 30 years. I've been working nonstop in Portugal, always with foreign clients in some big projects, such I worked for the enlargement of the bridge 25 de Abril, and also for the renovation of the German school regarding the legal part. So I work also in big projects, and I work nonstop in Portugal as a lawyer. Many times also I did litigation and arbitration, and that gives me a full picture of the legal system. So when there is a complex problem that arises within the visa work, I think we are in a better position to address and to solve that problem, and to take care of administrative immigration law when there is sometimes criminal law involved, and we have to highlight the American criminal law versus the Portuguese criminal law, and that has happened in respect to the many FBI records that, unlike our system, they have very old records still there. And so that may create complications for the Portuguese authorities, which are not used to see very old records in the criminal record itself. So lately we had some cases where we really had to understand and expose both the US legal system, criminal system, and the Portuguese criminal system, and our principles and our constitutional principles to defend a client. That being said, I have been speaking about investment and visas in Portugal a little bit all over the world. I lecture in Heidelberg, which is one of the top 50 universities for law in the world. I'm still very passionate. I still like a lot of what I do. I have a team of people that are very engaged in assisting people and helping people, especially Americans and British, moving to Portugal. At this point, we know exactly from a legal point of view and also from a relocation point of view what are the main challenges, although the Portuguese administration also brings systematically additional problems and issues that we have to address and solve. Last year, we did a roadshow in California, and that was very good because we understood better why Americans are moving. It was clear, although, of course, Portugal is still a small country in terms of economy, development, there's much to be made, but our internet is better, our streets are cleaner, we are not so much nervous. There was nervousness in the air As soon as we got the airport, we got our marketeer guy, and immediately the policeman raised questions because he was taking pictures, and obliged him to erase all the picture he took in the airport. And immediately we understood that perhaps our Portuguese space that is a little bit slower, but perhaps is a place that is better for the humankind. So I think we all have to balance between development, economy, and also a life that's good for a human being. And I think this is the great challenge humanity and all of us face at this moment. Yes. So, but in just the last few words, I think my team is eager and we enjoy what we do. We like helping people and assisting our clients. So our goal is that our clients feel supported and guided and have a flawless legal process, and also feel guided in the most important aspects of their relocation.
And thank you, Sandra. Yes, I think the last well, it's been going on for a while now, but the last few years, it's felt like the world has been a pretty tense place. And so
Yes.
people from all over the world are looking for somewhere where they can feel more secure and safer and, focus on things that are more important, like family, like not having to worry about the things that you mentioned. So I can see why more and more people are choosing Portugal for that.
Yes.
So we're gonna dive into the questions that people have asked us about the visas, and there is a Q&A section at the bottom. If people have more questions to ask, that's the best place to put it. Otherwise, if it goes in the chat, it's hard for us to keep on top of them. So a first general question, Sandra, if I wanted to move to Portugal ASAP, what visa is going to be the fastest for me to get approved, and what is going to be easiest for me to get the documents together?
So I think a D7 is a quite straightforward approach. But to qualify for D7, you need to have passive income. Passive income, for those that are not familiar with the visa, is income that you don't have to work for, such as rentals, pensions, royalties, dividends, interests. Those can be put in the category of passive income. So if you qualify for D7 visa, I would say that would be the more straightforward and the better approach. If you are still working for a foreign company, and so your income comes from work, in that case, you just qualify for D8 visa. And in that case, you have to opt for the D8 visa, and that's also a good option. Perhaps little less straightforward, but still a very good option. You just have to bear in mind that in both these visas, you have to be prepared to move to Portugal, to reside in Portugal, and at least to have your family life based in Portugal. These are the requirements for the visa. So I would say that these were the most important visas that you have. Do you want me to continue, or do you have,
No,
because
I
I
think
can
that's
explain how you can start with a D7 visa, but I let you continue if you with your.
yeah, we'll jump onto the D7 in a little bit. Let's just talk about any changes because I know there's some people who have joined us before. Have you noticed anything different when you've been helping people submit their applications over the
So
past few months?
2025, we have the minimum wage in Portugal increased. So the minimum wage is 870 euros. This is the minimum wage. So when you have to think about financial means to move to Portugal, when is the D7 visa, you have to have at least monthly the amount of 870 euros per month. When if you are bringing a spouse or children, you have to add additional 50% for the spouse, 30% for each child of this amount. So this in terms of financial means, this was a difference. We also noticed that before it was generally accepted FBI background checks sealed, and now they do want it apostilled. And this is a question. And even we had a client that when the process was changing, and now we are facing that in the US is getting increasingly more complex and is taking more time to get the FBI and to get it apostilled because of the huge demand and also problems of the system itself. And so because this happens, we had a client that was about to go to the consulate. He had an appointment, but the FBI apostille didn't come on time. So he brought the document that he was expecting the FBI apostille. He brought the sealed one, but nevertheless, they said they didn't even accept his process. So another novelty is the FBI has to be apostille, which is, so this is what the Portuguese law says. So a foreign document to be valid and enforceable before Portuguese authorities has to be apostilled. The apostille says to the Portuguese authorities and to the authorities all over the world, whenever we have a US document apostille, the US authorities are saying to Portugal and to the world, this document is valid, complies with US law, and therefore can be valid elsewhere in the world. So it's normal that it has to be apostilled. And this is a novelty that was not, it didn't happen before. Just now, I've heard of that before, now and then, but I always think it might be a little bit dangerous. But just now, today, we received an email from a client that decided to walk in Washington, and she was accepted. So we have to understand better how that operates. But there is also, from a very practical point of view, we are always noticing some changes in the process. But we have to understand if this is a standardized procedure, if this was an exception. This is something we have to verify.
Okay, and so you mentioned in the US, background checks done by the FBI now need to be apostilled.
Another thing that they are recently asking, they recently are asking for a driver's license, a color copy of the driver's license. And in one case, they even asked for a notarized color copy of the driver's license. So as a proof of address. So this is important also to take into account and to bring. In some recent cases, they were also asking for tax returns. Sometimes they ask, sometimes they don't, but it's always better to bring in.
And that's the US. I know we have a few people from
Yes.
the UK here. What do they feel about apostille documents?
They don't like, so the ACRAs normally don't want it apostille.
Okay.
And also the application forms, they also don't want it notarized. So whereas if you apply in the US and with the same law, the consulates in the US do demand notarized application forms, whereas this is not required in the United Kingdom. So many times they don't want it. Yes.
Okay, so if you are doing a little research on what you might need, you could get very conflicting information, because if you read what someone applied from the US said and you're applying from the UK, you could get incorrect information and go to the consulate. So this is why it's important to work with someone like Sandra, because they have
Yes,
up-to-date
we are
information.
trying, we pick from each client, we ask for a report, and we are also picking and trying to structure and to understand what's the standard, or at least what is the tendency, to make sure that our clients have a bulletproof process and have everything organized. Sometimes in the consulate, they ask for the whole file. Sometimes they ask for separate documentation and not ask for the documentation in a separate, you give me this, give me that, give me that. So, but I think it's very important to have a very complete process and bulletproof, and that can resist the unstandardization. And it's also very important that the client has the process very well organized and knows every detail of the process, so they can bring the documentation along when they're asking for the documents. It's interesting sometimes when it's a couple, I advise them also to ask if they can go together. Some people don't allow them to go together. Other places urge them to come together, even if they have appointments in different times. So it's a little bit uncertain, but this is also something that's important to know.
And so we've mentioned the UK and the US. I know we have some Canadians as well. They've got a different approach to the apostille, is that
Yes,
correct?
yes. In Canada, it's interesting because recently, it has 1 year or a little bit more, Canada entered into the Convention of Hague. So before it was not needed apostille documents when it was in respect to the criminal record from Canada. Now it's mandatory, and each consulate has a different approach, and they are a little bit more demanding, I would say, and a little bit less standardized than the US. And so it's very important to bear in mind the differences.
So we've got the UK, the US, and Canada, just three countries, all with different processes. And
And even in the US, San Francisco is different than Washington, and
okay.
Miami and Houston is also different than Washington. And it's important, the small stuff, but it's important in San Francisco that you bring a cashier check or a money order. Otherwise, they might not accept it. And the value that you have to bring, sometimes it might not be updated in the site. So it's better to go with a little time in advance and to make sure that the value is correct. Otherwise, you have the option to go to the post office in the corner to get other to get the right
Updated thing.
amount and the right way to pay the fees. So this
Okay.
is quite important, yes.
So you have to be really, really up to date on everything.
Yes.
Terms of responsibility document, I understand there's been a small change. You mentioned that the other day.
Yes, I think it's always difficult to talk about changes because they ask in many places, when in respect to the term of responsibility, they ask for a notarized term of responsibility. But just last week, we brought a notarized term of responsibility for it was a child, and they wanted the mother to sign in front of them. So it's still, I think it's better to take the notarized terms of responsibility, but bear in mind that they might ask the person responsible to sign before them.
Okay. So a lot of details there.
Yes.
Let's before we dive into our first one, which is going to be the D7, let's talk
Mhm.
about some of the reasons people are wanting to move to Portugal. I know a lot of people are trying to move from other parts of the world to get away from it, but there's also something about Portugal that's attracting them, some benefits, sort of like the tax-funded public health care, safety, things like that. Sandra, what would you say are the positives for Portugal?
I think that the great thing, I think safety is super important. Um, I think 3 weeks ago, I was talking with a US lawyer, and she told me that she didn't leave the place where she lived. It was quite peaceful. There was not much criminality over there. But she told us that she would go to one side of the street, and the neighbor would go to another side of the street. and the neighbor got shot, and she was about to go to the same site, and she was with a baby and a young child. And I also have a lot of clients saying that their children cannot play outside, and cannot be alone in the night, and cannot go. So criminality, so I think safety is very important here in Portugal. It's still not perfect, but still very safe. I would say quality of life, it's a huge thing. um, I was recently in California, and I had the opportunity to understand that our internet was much better than their internet, at least the common one. The internet in the hotel was lousy. And so we actually did a webinar in California, and we decided to get a place in Palo Alto to do it, because in the hotel it was not good, and I didn't feel safe because it was extremely unstable and it was difficult to get it. So I think I would say quality of life, also education, safety, also a good internet. I would say these were very, very important, and a more healthy life. So in terms, just for instance, education, my son works in a public university. It's ranked well internationally, and I pay something like 800 euros per year for a good. He studies electronic engineer and computer science, and I pay 800 euros per year, and we don't have the thing of student loans. We have the Nova University, where we have an increasing amount of Germans studying there for masters in management in economy. And I think that for Portugal is huge. We know Germany spends a lot of money in education, and it's a very high standard in Europe. So the fact that there are so many Germans studying in Nova, in Carcavelos, and I dare to say that the surf is a good, fantastic attraction, but not only the surf, the quality of the university is huge and it's very good. So I think that education, it's also an important thing. So I think it's as a Portuguese, I'm also proud to present Portugal not only as a country of lower salaries or a more affordable way of living, but a country that has a good internet, that has it has a high level of proficiency in English, had a good education. So also families, American families and British families, can come to Portugal and grant a high level education to their kids. And a country that can also be, I can also be a country of opportunities. I think it depends of what we Portuguese can do with it. And also, I think the expats can be really a source for development and innovation. And I think the Portuguese government also wants to attract foreign investment and innovative projects. That's also quite important for the Portuguese.
Okay. Well, let's dive into our first few visas to discuss, and these visas will allow you to move to Portugal and live there and take advantage of all the fine things that Sandra just mentioned. But before we do that, I'm just going to put in the chat, Sandra has very kindly offered that the first 30 people that get in touch with her and her team can have a free 15-minute consultation. So there is a code, it's Portugal is 30. I'll put both of them in the chat. And if you email that code to the email address, which I'll share in the chat, they will offer you a free 15-minute consultation. So I'll share that now, and I'll also share it in the email I send out afterwards. So, Sandra, let's talk about the D7. This is the one that people are most interested. It's the one I think that you mentioned earlier is probably the most straightforward of the visas in terms of whether you would qualify or not. What is this visa? Who is it suitable for? And just what are the basics of it?
So this visa is suitable for all those that have passive income, meaning those that I already mentioned, but I think it's not bad to repeat. Those that have rentals, pensions, interests, dividends, income they don't have to work for. This
Okay.
is the financial side of the D7. On also you have to add, and it's also two important pillars are the proof of accommodation. So you have to prove that you have a place to live in Portugal. You can get a rental. In some places is 6 months, in other places is 12 months, and or you can acquire a property, or in some cases you can even have in specific situations someone attesting that you can live in their home. This is something that can be made. It's also important to present a criminal record. This is a very important issue that has to be made in all the visas. This is common to all the visas. So these were the three important pillars. So you show that you have passive income that you don't have to work for, meaning rentals, interests, royalties, pensions. You have to show that you have a proof of accommodation, and you have to show that you have a decent criminal record. I do not say clean criminal, but at least with nothing really serious, at least in the last years. This is quite important for the D7. I will ask someone from my team to open the light because this is getting a little bit dark over here. Uh, you start the process in Portugal. You start the process in Portugal. So to start the process, you need the first step would see to get an IF, which can be done remotely, which is a tax number in Portugal, something similar to your social security card. This is important. Afterwards, it would be important to get a bank account in Portugal, and also to get a proof of accommodation in Portugal. More or less at the same pace, it would be important to get an appointment in the consulate and to prepare all the documentation for the consulate. At the office, we try to do everything that we can do, it's possible to do on our end. So we fill in the applications, we set the appointment in the consulate despite the extremely difficulties and getting appointments. We fill everything that we have to fill, and we guide the clients to everything that has to be done on their end. And we set up a lot of personal Zoom in-person, one-to-one Zoom meetings where we explain and clarify any doubts or anything they might still don't know, or where they might need guidance into. Afterwards, so once you have the NIF, the bank account, the proof of accommodation, and an appointment prepared, the clients normally send all the document to us, what it has to be obtained from the client, especially the FBI background check, apostille, and everything they have to notarize. And by the time they have to appointment, we verify, check, double check, triple check everything. On top of that, I think it's important, and we normally also prepare the client for the appointment in the consulate. It's important to know that according to Portuguese law, it is possible they cannot just not accept your process. And you have a 10-day period where you should be, this is a general constitutional rule and also an administrative law rule and applicable to immigration law. Normally you should have 10 days to overcome any lack in terms of formality of your process. And also the consular authorities, the VSF, should, if they intend not to accept or raise any type of objection to your visa, they should do it in writing. And you should also have the possibilities within a 10-day time frame to present allegations. And there were not many cases where we had a proposal for denial, but I remember three important cases. One first case, it was when there was someone with a digital nomad visa, and they didn't have a contract, an employment contract, written employment contract. And the embassy was not accepting because they didn't have a written contact, and they consider that that was indispensable to prove the professional relationship with a foreign entity. And we explained that according to the Portuguese law and also according to US law, a labor contract doesn't have to be in written to be valid. And we asked also their employer to write a declaration stating that he was working for them for a while. And this was quite important, and we had a successful outcome in the process. We had two other recent cases. Once where there was a client that had 3 criminal records that happened 30 years ago, and they didn't they send a proposal for refusal, and we managed to explain the difference between the US criminal system and our. We translated the criminal record, and the client also presented testimonials of his life during the past 20 years. And in the end, the embassy agreed that he should be approved. We had also in London a couple that they thought they had not enough financial means, and there was a proposal for denial, but they hadn't written the documentation properly. So in those cases, in the end, the clients were also accepted, and so the proposal was reversed. But I think when you go to the appointment in the consulate, it's important that you know, and our clients didn't know it and didn't know how to address it, that if there is a proposal for denial, that sometimes they even call it denial, you have the opportunity to present allegations and to overcome this. I don't know if I got a little bit out of topic, and if you think, James, that there is still important subjects to explain in respect to the D7. Do you want me to explain the whole procedure? How do you think, in terms of the questions from our audience, how should we continue?
Well, there's one question quite simple that I can see people asking, which is you say you need a accommodation in Portugal before you move to Portugal.
Yes.
First of all, why is that? And second of all, how do you get a rental or purchase a place before you actually live there?
So you can hire someone. We ourselves do that for our clients. So we try to be a one-stop shop. I think Portugal wants to be sure that the persons coming have the enough financial means to reside in Portugal, and that they also have a roof over their head. So they also have a place to stay that they can afford and that can stay, so they won't be a burden to our social security and they won't cause chaos in that system. So this is why it's important. And even though, as we all know, the D7 process has a very low requirement in respect to all the other existing visas in Europe. Um, so this is why it's necessary, but it's possible to hire someone to get you an accommodation. This is something that's possible, and you can get perhaps a more affordable place just for to use for the visa, but it should be done legally. But you should you can get an affordable place. Another thing that could be made, so you, in theory and according to legal system, it is perfectly possible that you sign a contract before you go to the appointment and write in this contract, it will only enter into force when it will only enter into force when I come to Portugal, and I only start paying rentals there in that moment. The only problem there is that there is a huge demand for rentals, and so the landlords many times don't accept this kind of deals, although it is perfectly possible. But so many times our clients end to have to pay 2 or 3 rentals before they actually move to Portugal.
Okay. It's just one of the costs that you
Yes,
have to
you have
accept,
to. Yes.
actually. Um, okay, so just to recap, let's say I have passive income such as a retirement income like Social Security or a pension. I'm a single person. I would need 870 euros a month. I
Yes.
would need 1 year of savings. Is that correct? So 12
Yes.
times 870.
Yes. So,
Um,
yes. In some consulates, at this point, according to the information we have from some consulates, we advise to have at least 12,000 euros in the bank account, because we saw an official list, I believe it was from Newark, where they advised 11,800 something. So this
okay.
was something that was needed. Okay.
Okay. I think that's slightly above the 12 times 870, is it? So they
Yes,
have.
it might be, but since I saw that in an official list, I
Mhm.
just don't want to take risks. So I think
Okay.
it's better to show more. I
Hmm.
would say this is not, people would not be denied because of this, but this should be, I think it's safer to have at least 12,000 euros.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense. So I need the savings, which need to be in a Portuguese bank account. And
Mhm.
in order to get a Portuguese bank account, I need a NIF number, which is the
Yes,
tax number, which is something along with the bank account that I could get remotely
yes,
through you or.
correct.
And finally, the last two major things that I think you mentioned were some kind of address in Portugal, whether that's a property I own or somewhere that I've leased, and
Yes.
a criminal record
Record.
check.
Apostilles, yes.
Apostille.
Which is
Okay.
at this point taking long to take care in the US. And they
Okay.
anticipate also more difficulties with the public authorities. So at this point is something to bear in mind, and it's very important the timing to get this FBI background check, and also to bear in mind that it has, in most of the cases, a 90 days validity.
Okay. It's
And you can be not accepted because it already expired by the time you have the appointment.
okay. I imagine it's quite confusing to work out everything that you know. I need a document that's going to be apostilled and it's got a 90-day validity, but at the same time, there's a
It's
delay
taking
on
very
getting them.
long, yes. So you have to, it's also getting hard to get appointments. So this is something that's quite complex.
Yes.
To also not to, sometimes people have to get two FBIs because it took longer. It didn't match with the it didn't match with
The time frame they
the
ended
date
up
of the
with.
appointment, yes, and to
Okay.
get the apartment and to get everything together. So yeah, in terms of timeline, it is something where a huge preparation makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Okay. So one change that's coming to the Europe, to the Schengen area this year is we're going to have ETIAS, similar
Mhm.
to what people entering the US have, where they have to get a sort of a pre-clearance before they come in. I think
Yes.
the cost is small, 10, 15 euros, something like that. Um, if I have my 120-day visa for the D7 or for the
Mm.
digital nomad visa, do you think I'm going to need this ETS as well, or is this something that hasn't come up yet? Because I understand it's still up in the air. This.
It hasn't come up yet, but I would say that with a 120, you also need the ETS. You might need, because the idea, it's not a visa itself, it's more something, a measure to track also people traveling and moving everywhere. So I would say that perhaps yes,
Okay. And
that
I'm.
would not exempt you because it doesn't have the nature of a visa. So, but if you are a D7 holder, no. But
Mhm.
with just a short-term visa, I think it might make sense if the idea is to track where people are traveling and how people are doing things.
So there's two appointments that people will take. One in their country of residency or nationality,
Yes,
with the consulate or VFS, and another one in Portugal with
yes.
IMA. Can we talk about those two appointments and sort of roughly how long they take and what someone should expect?
It's very difficult to say how long they would take. So it varies a lot. But it can take to 1 hour, so you might have to wait more time. In the IMA, just recently we had appointments that had took half an hour. We had appointments that took 1 hour. We had appointments that the system went down 4 times and it was 4 hours. And you had appointments that were 7 hours. So you did have a lot of appointments. So a lot of differences in terms of timing. And also in the consulates and in VFS, it varies. So the first appointment, you have to bring in hard copies, lots of documentation. It depends to the place. Some of the documentation has to be notarized. Some of the documentation has to be apostilled. So, and there is also a lot of unwritten rules that change a lot, such as the driver's license, the tax return, the registry of the lease agreement before the tax authority. I have been even seen people being asked for the mobile of the landlord. So there's a lot of documentation that you have to bring in hard copies, and also a specific application form that in US has to be notarized. So you'll bring all the documentation in hard copies. Normally, this first appointment doesn't have a structure of an interview. It has more a structure of documentation reviewing.
Hmm.
But it's important to bear in mind that you should be given the opportunity to surpass any lack of formality within a 10-day time. And also, if they intend to refuse, that you have a 10-day to present allegations. So this is quite important in the appointment in the consulate. Then afterwards, in the consulate, they should give you an appointment in the IMA, the Immigration Services in Portugal, which should be done within 4 months after the time you have the appointment. And in this second appointment, you have to bring new documents. You have to fill in a specific forms, and you have to bring also updated documents of everything you have. So I've seen lately, if you have a bank statement and it's not the last one, they will be asking for the bank statement. This is something they will be asking for in the second appointment. And also for some documents. As always, it's everything a little bit unstandardized. So recently, as I told you, they changed the rules and it was necessary and notarized. It was important a notarized term of responsibility, but in some places they still demand that you, in some places they still demand that the responsible person signs in front of the services. Lately, we had a complex case of a very old lady that, despite our of us urgent her, telling her 20 times to get the health insurance she didn't get before the IMA appointment. So we also here use the 10-day possibility to bring additional documents, to bring the health insurance, which she didn't have by the time we had the appointment.
So for insurance, then, is it for IMA appointment, health insurance, and for the consulate slash VFS, normally travel insurance? Is that correct?
Yes, at this point, according to the latest practice of our services, I think this would be the most advisable solution. So
Okay.
normally, even the VFS advises a travel insurance, and I think it's good to use this one because we know for sure that would be accepted. And then when you have the IMA appointment to get a health insurance in Portugal. Yes.
And if I have a D7 visa, which I would only have if I had some passive income, but I wanted to work in Portugal for a Portuguese employer, would this be possible?
I think this is a little bit a gray area. This
Okay.
is not absolutely straightforward, and there's nothing written. I've seen for a client in Canada, they once told her that she could not work in Portugal. But the general idea and the idea of immigration is that the D7 is for those that don't need to work in Portugal. So it's not a work visa. So generally, the person doesn't have to, should not work in Portugal. This is the general view. But if the person wants to work in Portugal, at least for a Portuguese company, if they want to work in Portugal, I can see other possibilities, and we might change the visa or use other means to allow the person to work for a Portuguese company, even as a service provider, or creating a company or later. So I could see the possibilities to change visa and to solve the client situation, although directly you should not work for a Portuguese company if you under D7 without prepare taking it into account what you have to comply with.
Okay. So, next question. People are always asking about when they can leave Portugal, like when should they stay here for their appointments, when should they leave? I know within the 120-day period, it's a double stamped entry.
Yes.
What's unclear is there's once you have your IMA appointment, but you haven't yet been granted your residence permit, should you or can you leave during that period to go elsewhere?
You can leave. You were talking about the two entrances and other possibilities. So,
First, the two entrances in the
yes.
120 days.
So you can go elsewhere, but I would not advise. I think this is not the best time to travel a lot. So I would advise you to comply with the two entrances and not overdoing much in that specific before you have the resident permit card. This would be my advice, although I've had experience with a lot of clients that went out and came and had no problem. Just recently, we had a client, she had a student visa and was coming from India, and they hadn't issued her resident permit card, and we weren't sure of her situation. It was, but this is a little bit different. But I would advise in those periods not to overdo, the two entrances. And even if you want to go to travel a little bit in Europe, come from Spain, and don't overdo with the two entrances. Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about dependents then. So on the D7, we can add children as one of the dependents. And
Yes.
normally they're considered dependent until they're 18, is that right? Or unless they're full-time education.
Not necessarily. They might be considered in Portugal normally until 23 if they
Okay.
are studying there, or 25 with a master's and thing. I think if they are studying, if they are not married, they might be considered dependent. If they are not considered dependent, sometimes what our advice is that they can easily come under a student visa. This is something that can be done. Okay.
Okay, because there's been some questions from people who they're going to move to Portugal with teenagers who are maybe 16 years old, 17 years old, and then they're wondering what happens once they turn 18? Can they still be my dependents, especially if they decide to
Yes,
move
they
to
can
another
be
country?
dependent. They can also always come with a student visa. And sometimes it doesn't have to be something super academic, and it doesn't have to be college. So it's possible the solution of the student visa is quite good. And normally in Portugal, people are dependent when they are 24, 25. Sometimes they are still dependent. If they are not married, if they prove they are studying, that you are paying for tuition, if you prove that they do not have their own income, I think they might be considered dependent, and this might be a solution.
Okay. Let's move on to the digital nomad visa then, which is,
Yes.
would you say that's the second most popular visa, Sandra?
Yes, I would say that's the second most popular visa. Yes. And the digital nomad visa, the world may cause some misconceptions. So it's for any type of work The requirement at this type of work is that you are being paid by a foreign entity. And it can be a labor contract, you can be a service provider, you can have have your own company working. So it's a professional activity being paid by a foreign entity, irrespective of the nature of the contract and irrespective of the nature of the activity. So it doesn't have to be digital activity, although the word digital nomad might lead to that. It can be a doctor, it can be a lawyer, it can be a psychologist, it can be any type of work, or even some people an artisan, some people that creates its own art. As long as they are being paid by foreign entities, this is all digital nomad visa. And so this is the second most popular, and this is the one. Yes, you just have to show in terms of financial means that in the 3 months prior to the application, you work on average. It doesn't have to be the same every month, but that on average you earn for Portuguese minimum wages, which is something like 3,480 euros, if I'm not completely mistaken. Yes.
Okay. And then if you wanted to bring a spouse or partner and children, is there a calculation for how much
Yes,
extra
you
you
have
would
to
need?
add to that 50% if you're bringing a spouse or 30% if you're bringing a child. And
Okay.
it's important to know that both the D7 and D8 are residential visas, unlike the Golden Visa. So they require you to reside in Portugal and to have your family life based in Portugal. So this is quite important, and that in the majority of its regime, these two visas, as all the other D7 visas, in many aspects, they follow the exact same regime. In terms of renewals, in terms of access to citizenship, it's very important to tell people that the D7 and the D8 are perhaps better, or for sure better paths to Portuguese citizenship and to European citizenship than the Golden Visa. Because if you reside in Portugal, you are in better condition to prove the 5 years residency and also to prove a strong relationship with the Portuguese community.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, the apart from the income, which is slightly different, the D7 is for passive, the digital nomad visa is for actively earned income. They more or less follow a similar structure. Is that correct?
They are more or less, can you refer?
They have similar requirements, so
Yes,
address in Portugal
yes.
beforehand.
Other than the financial requirements and the type of activity, they almost everything from the rest follow the same regime in
Okay.
many aspects. Yes.
And so it's the permit is normally granted for 2 years at a time, but I understand on the digital nomad visa, there's a 1 year option, which
Yes.
some people might take if they're thinking, I'm not sure about Portugal, I'll just do it for a year. What happens
Yes.
if you do this 1 year and you want to renew? Can you
Yes,
get
I
it
think
changed?
it's possible through the IMO, although there is not a strict, it's not in the law a specific way to do it. I would advise to many people that it's better to do the 2 year than
Okay.
the 1 year. This is a better option if they can do
Mhm.
it. They can even try they might, so it's better the long term. And if in terms of proof of accommodation, there are some things that can be prepared. So if you're not sure, I would advise you to go for the long-term digital nomad visa. This would be our advice normally.
And if you decided actually I'm want to leave after a year, could you then cancel your permit?
Yeah, see, if you don't renew it, it's automatically cancelled. The
Okay.
thing is, you have to, this is something that you don't have by default. To be entitled to reside in Portugal, if you are a non-European, you need a visa. If you don't have the visa, you are not required to reside here. So you don't even have to cancel. You don't have to have an act of will. You just, if you don't renew it, it's automatically cancelled.
Okay. Now you mentioned the income has to come from abroad, and I've got a question that comes up quite a lot, which is people they go into their office and they say, "I want to, work remotely," and the company says,
Yeah.
"Fine," and then they say, "I want to work remotely from Portugal," and they
Mhm.
go, "Oh, I don't know about that because there's potentially legal or tax implications and that." And
Mhm.
the option comes up of an employer of record, which, as I understand it, is like this intermediary who
Yes.
can have a
Mhm.
presence in Portugal and hire the person and do payroll and everything. And they sort of go in between and sort of take the payment and do everything. If someone was to do that, would that work, or would they now be receiving money from a Portuguese company because that employer of record has a base in
So
Portugal?
I like you, James, because you like you raise complex questions and I like complex issues. So this is a gray area, and I think everything depends how you portray things and how the specific authorities interpret. So I think this is a question that can have subjective answers and different answers. So this is there are several options that can be done over there. So I think that just that straightforward, this person could be considered paid by a Portuguese company because the person directly paying her is a Portuguese company. Nevertheless, I think if I had this particular question, I would ask specifically the consulate about the possibility and about what would be the solution that they would accept, and
Mhm.
also with our expert in international taxation in our accountant, I would say from a tax perspective, what would be the most tax efficient solution. So I would have to match a tax efficient solution with a viable legal thing. I think in theory, just that straightforward, a company of record, Portuguese company of record, paying someone that wants to come here, it would be considered that the person is being paid in Portugal. If you explain this properly to the authorities, and if they accept because they understand that actually the money is coming from a foreign source, then this might be acceptable. But then again, as in many situations that we face in the visa, we are in a gray area, and
Mhm.
depends how you portray things, how you interpret the law. So there is a level of subjectivity and discretionary powers, and the way you present things, it's quite significant.
Do you think there's a strong possibility that two different consulates could interpret that differently? One might say it's
Yes,
okay,
and
and one
even
might
two
say,
different persons in the same consulate. I
okay.
would never, yes, and I would never, but just that straightforward, a person
Hmm.
being paid by an an employer of record, and without more explanations, probably this would not be accepted. We had a case of a for client, someone that contacted us, and he invested in Portugal and got rental properties in Portugal. So he wanted to come with a D7, but the income from the rentals was generated in Portugal. And I asked whether to New York VFS if whether they would accept this or not, and they said bluntly no. The money should come from abroad. I may uh, I may consider that other consulates may consider otherwise, because in the end, the money, the investment in the properties to be rented come from the outside. But this was the interpretation that was made. When it should, both the D7 and D8, the money should be, the financial means should be foreign sourced, should be not sourced in Portugal. The idea is to attract foreign investment, to attract sources and money and income from the outside.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit about switching visas. And I'm thinking someone could start on the digital nomad visa. They could be, close to retirement age, and they could be working remotely for a company. And then halfway through that period, they're able to retire. How easy would it be to switch visas, say from a digital nomad visa to a D7 or, to another visa?
I think it might, there is nothing written in the law about that, but I
Hmm.
do not anticipate any complications. I think by the time of the renewal of the visa, you should present the proper documentation. And I do not anticipate that if you still have the financial means, the proof of accommodation, a clean criminal record, everything updated, that you should not be left outside because
Okay.
of that. So by the time of the renewal, it's the time to take care of this.
We mentioned I'm a few times, and some people in the chat are aware that there's a backlog, and getting an appointment for your first appointment or for renewal can be
Yes.
hard. And we've talked about it before on the webinar, Sandra. Has there been any update on this?
So now this is also a novelty. I didn't tell a little time ago. Now there is a novelty. So there should be, if they don't give you the appointment, there should be a special registration, and sometimes the appointments can come through this registration. And so this could be, although there is the backlog, the situation cannot be compared with the golden visa. It's much better. Another possibility it is if you don't have an appointment within 3 months' time and you contacted the authorities, there is a possibility to do an injunction, and normally the appointments are granted. But we still face complex situations that in the office we have been able to manage. So we've seen a whole family with young children where everybody has the appointment at the same time in different places. And we managed to talk with them and convince them to have all the family in one place. But that requires negotiation capacities, diplomacy, being nice. So it's every day facing a new challenging. Yes.
And for those lucky enough to get their IMA appointment when they want it and everything,
Yes.
would you say for someone new to Portugal that it's an easy process? Like, is English widely spoken, for example? Are the people helpful, or does it vary?
Where can you rephrase the question? I lost myself a little bit. Yes. Yes.
So with the IMA appointment for
Yeah.
newcomers to Portugal, would you say this is easy, or would you say it's can be challenging? Is
It
like do
can be
people speak
challenging.
English?
Sometimes people are tired. Also,
Hmm.
sometimes the computers are not working or the system goes down. And so they are a little bit, they have lots of work. They are a little bit frustrated and tired. And also the system, it's not completely standardized. The other day, I went to the appointment with the mother and one of the children. And then a colleague of mine from the office I went to Lisbon, the colleague of mine went to Odivelas, and then with the father and another child. And then in Odivelas, they said, no, no, for us, it's not enough the term of responsibility notarized. We want to see the signature. The mother has to sign before us. So I went with the mother to Odivelas, and the mother had to sign. And in the midst of that, the kids were making a little bit of noise, and one of the very nice person of my team helped. So it varies. There are
Hmm.
nice people. There are people that are tired and a little bit frustrated because they are the face. They are the ones that also face the complaints that of a system that is not working perfectly. So it's also hard to work over there.
Yeah, I can imagine
But
it's not an
sometimes
easy job.
they do know English. Sometimes they are not proficient at all, and they ask you to translate everything.
Okay.
Yes.
We mentioned very briefly the golden visa.
Yes.
If someone was considering this at the moment, should they expect to be stuck in the backlog that's existed for the past few years? Has there been any improvement?
So recently, the Portuguese government issue new measures to overcome the backlog. So this is something and urge people to bring and to present the updated documents again, which is more burden on the parties that already invested in Portugal and all the lawyers. So and we've seen some little improvements in terms of the development in the golden visa procedure. So we hope it to get better, although it's not yet perfect. And there's many of our clients don't understand why they do have to present updated documentation again.
Well, one of the reasons people look at the golden visa is they think, I don't know if I want to move to Portugal yet,
Yes.
but I want like a backup option.
Yes, and it's
If,
good.
mhm,
It's a
if
good if you want a safe harbor.
exactly.
You are not in the condition to reside in Portugal, but you want a safe harbor. Yes.
Just in case you need it in the future. But
Mm.
let's say I submitted, my application a year ago. It
Mm.
hasn't been processed yet, and then the country that I'm in, something bad happens where I decide I want to leave immediately. Can I, like, what happens if your application is then in the backlog?
Mm.
Are you any better off than if you'd submitted it, or would you be looking at submitting like a D7 or something else in that
I
instance?
think it might make more sense to submit a D7, but probably what would happen in many situations is that if you have a D7 processing, they might not accepting. If you have a golden visa processing, they might not accept a D7. It
Okay.
depends.
So
We would have to take a look. We would have to talk with the consulates. We would have to check with IMA here. But for sure, we would get a solution. Even if
and
it's quitting the golden visa procedure and
mhm.
start a D7, which might be a good option.
Okay. So it sounds like
Yes,
again, it could depend on the situation,
yes,
could depend on the consulate, and to
yes,
speak to
yes.
you. Okay, and then so I understand with the golden visa, you have an investment or donation if you choose to go that route. Would someone need to hold that investment until they get citizenship, or just until the 5 years of residency are up?
Until the 5 years of the golden visa time.
Okay, and then
And
they can quit.
even during these 5 years, if you do not long to keep the golden visa, you are allowed to sell. If you don't want the golden visa advantages, you can sell the investment within the 5 year times without any negative consequences for you.
Okay. Now, we mentioned IMA delays. One of the areas where there has been delays has been sort of for family reunification for
Yes,
Article 15. This is for people who have an EU, EEA, Swiss passport, they
yes,
can bring their dependents.
yes.
Let's say that, so I have an Irish passport, I can move to Portugal, and I have an American spouse.
Mm.
What would you recommend I do in this situation? I can move there. Should they join me and do the Article 15 or
So
separate?
the correct answer would
Hmm.
be that they would come under the family reunification procedure.
Okay.
And my advice, and I will tell you that, and my advice would depend on the exact procedure and timing of IMA at a given point.
Okay.
And I would say there are two options. You can ask for, if it's not a problem for you to travel a lot outside of Portugal to come and go, perhaps let's wait for the IMA appointment. If for you it's important to travel outside of Portugal and come again, and you might have problems, then in this case you have to opt to do an injunction in case they don't do it within a 3 months time.
Hmm.
Or you might try to get the D7 visa or D8 visa. But the D7 visa and the D8 visa would not be the natural route. They would be
Yes.
a little bit of artificial routes that people
Okay.
may take, but it would depend on the specificities of the case. If there's a possibility for the IMA to have an appointment in a decent time frame, that is the way to go. But it will always depends on the specifics of what is happening at a given moment.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. I ask you a lot of very specific questions, Sandra, and I
And
know
complex
things can
questions, you
change.
always, yes. But I
But
think the thing is, in the end, You can copy the process of your friend, but there is also always specificities, gray areas, things when it's better to be fully supported when you have a complex situation. And actually, we have had lately many clients that tried to do the process on their own, but then they were rejected or denied, or they decided, no, it's better. They tried first to do on their own, and then they contacted us.
Yes, and I will sort of mention again for those that do want to contact you,
Yes.
you do have that offer for the first 30 people that get in touch of a free 15-minute consultation. So I will share the details of that for everyone again
And also the other can send us an email. Yes,
and
and
send it.
we'll be more than glad to answer their questions.
So one more question then for those moving as European citizens. As I understand it, they go to the Câmara Municipal and they get their crew. What
Yes,
is that correct? What happens at this appointment? Is it a fairly easy appointment to get a crew?
it depends. So
Okay.
as always. So it's important to you have to do it in the city council of your official residency. And you have to verify what are the requirements in each city council. It varies a little bit.
Okay.
And some city councils you can go without an appointment. In
Hmm.
other city councils, it's better to get an appointment before. And the what is needed varies a little bit, but it should be relatively straightforward. You should show that you have your passport, proof of income, a place to live. You should prove the basics. But it depends.
Okay.
It should be quite straightforward because as an European, you should be entitled to reside in Portugal. But as always, if you want to be supported, it might make sense to have professional help because you never know if people know English or not, but it
Mhm.
depends on how you want to do it also.
Okay, so probably easier than a D7 or a D8, but not necessarily straightforward because every
Yes, and,
council has
and
their own thing.
definitely the family reunification, it's more difficult at this point in most cases than a D7 or a D8.
Okay.
And sometimes you have to go to court to obtain it. So but it has to be, we have to analyze a little bit case by case, taking into account the needs of a specific person.
Okay, so I just have a couple more questions then about driving licenses, which and exchanging them, which comes later on after you've moved to Portugal. When should someone exchange their driving license, and can they continue using their current license for a period of time?
They can continue using for a period of time. Normally, it's mandatory to change it after 2 years, and you can do it online. Yes.
Okay, and you can do it online. Fantastic. And that would be, I understand, a different, so we've mentioned sort of many different organizations like IMA, Consulate, VFS, or
Yes.
VSF. The driving license is handled by a different department again. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. EMT.
Okay. Sandra, these are all the questions that were asked in advance, and I know there's quite a few outstanding from people who weren't able to do them. I think what would be best is if I send that list through to you and your team, and you can answer
Yes.
people, or they can
Yes, or
follow
they
up.
can send us an email, and even if they are not in the first 30, we will try to get them answers.
In terms of, I imagine you're getting quite a few inquiries in emails from people at the moment from different parts of the world wanting to.
Probably, I don't know, but no, for sure in the office before we were, but for
Yes.
at this point, for sure we are getting already some emails.
Yes, in general, I think there's been another sort of uptick in people wanting to move to Portugal over
Yes.
the past few months. Well, if there's anything else that you want to finish on, Sandra, just to sort of say about moving
Yes,
to.
I think I have to say that for me and my team, our goal is that the person does feel supported throughout the whole process. Our focus and our it's to have a flawless legal process, but to
Mhm.
many of our clients are already friends, and whenever they have something serious and complicated, they reach out to us. So and at this point, we know the process very well. We trying we know the difference. It's different. The consulates are operating in different ways. When you go to new work, you just have to present a document just to get the appointments, where other places have different procedures. Canada has different procedures. Definitely the UK has the rules from the US do not apply to the UK. So if you want to have a successful visa application, I think it makes all the sense to have professional support. We have as clients many US immigrant lawyers, and they said we would never dare to do the process in alone. So I think it's useful for those that don't have that much time to spend, and want that can signify sparing thousands of euros to have the proper support at the right time, and to also to do your work, because we also need clients that take care of their part. Okay.
And I can say from many of the people that have come to the webinars before or read the Portuguese website, they've used your services and they found it extremely helpful. I think particularly just having someone to guide them through the process and come to the IMA appointments and explain these issues, which aren't always very straightforward.
Yes, and to save definitely I'm appointments. Just it was yesterday that there was a family with young kids that each of the persons had appointments in a different IMA in different regions, and we managed to put all together. It would be extremely hard to get new appointments, so this can be very, very important for families to have the proper support at a given time.
Okay. Well, Sandra, thank you so much for all of your advice and information that
Okay.
you've provided. I will definitely be having you back on soon for more questions about the D7. I will try and come up with some more complicated, specific ones. But
Okay.
we enjoy talking about the gray areas.
Yes, so do we. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. And yes, and
Uh,
everybody that needs help, we are here to help and to be of service and to guide you throughout the visa.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and see you next time.
Thank you.